One of the major reasons why I sometimes get very, very depressed, just serious depression, is because of social pressures of what it is to be a guy. Some of these social pressures are very toxic. These toxic social pressures is what people refer to as toxic masculinity. And I know people don't want to hear that phrase, but you need to realize that the phrase is referring to toxic pressures. Oh, you're not. I mean, some things that it could go into. Oh, you're not being aggressive enough. You're not being dominant enough. You're not taking charge enough. You're not competitive enough. You know, those sorts of things. It's the pressures that tell someone that they're not good enough. Now, it's always good to try to strive to be better, but when you feel bad about yourself unless you can meet some unrealistic standards, it's pretty crippling. It can be pretty crippling. There are a lot of fucked up social pressures, and what's interesting is bullying culture really likes to take advantage of that kind of thing. It's the reason why guys continually have to prove their masculinity. You know, I mean, my appearance. I try to do everything I can, and the way that I talk, and the way that I move and walk, and all of that, I've worked very hard since I was a teenager to try to find the most masculine mannerisms and appearances that I could. You know, there's part of me that's still trying to continually prove how masculine I am. When I did the purple phase, it was very liberating. But then eventually I switched back. But at this point, it's just out of personal preference. Whether or not it's something that I would have had the preference to if society was different, I don't know, whatever. Society is what it is. I was raised the way that I was. So I have these ideas of what it is visually to be masculine. And there's things that they are things I still try to go for. I realize some of this may be a primal thing. It may be an instinctual thing. And that's all right. But we need to look at that for what it is and realize that we don't have to be bound by those things. It's certainly not saying you should be ashamed for liking certain things, but just being aware of its primal elements, and that we don't have to be that way, I think is an important thing. I think it's something we should really consider. We've created a society where you really can be whatever you want to be, and there are many sides wanting to tear that down, strangely, oddly enough. But to state negative things about toxic masculinity is to basically state, hey, stop feeling bad about yourself for not being able to come to unrealistic standards. These standards are, quite frankly, impossible to completely come to. That's why I say they're unrealistic. They're not actually possible. I'd say it's on par with the visual standards that are pushed onto women. I'd say it's just as harsh as those, but I'd say that the effects of it carry much further. If we want to reduce male suicides, I'd say that it's pretty important that we address these pressures in society. It's unfortunate that these standards that are pushed onto people make masculinity something that's fragile. So to just state the term toxic masculinity ends up being extremely offensive. So there are times where we need to be aggressive, assertive, competitive, and we certainly shouldn't be afraid to be those things. That's the danger of not letting those who need to talk about this stuff to talk about this stuff. That's the danger of, if we let those who aren't being hurt personally by these toxic standards on themselves, if we let those who aren't guys dictate this stuff, then it will indeed turn into something that's just anti-masculine. That's why this stuff is important to talk about. Anyway.